Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. In our last lesson, we were speaking on the conditions of the acceptable or accepted ahad narrations. The narrations, according to the author, Al-Hafidh bin Hajar, Allah's mercy be upon his soul, that are considered to be other than mutawatir or ahad, whether they are mashhur, gharib, aziz, however they are, if they're not mutawatir, according to the author, he says that there are conditions and prerequisites for these narrations to be accepted, for them to be accepted. So he says here, وخبر الأحاد بنقل عدل تام الضبط متصل السند غير شاذ. He says غير معلل ولا شاذ هو الصحيح لذاته. He says here in the Khabar Ahad, which is reported by an adl, and we explained in the last class what's meant by an adl and what's meant by adala, and some of the similarities between adala or the shahid and the rawi, the shahid and the rawi. He then says tam al-dabti. You would say الشرط الثاني تمام الضبط, according to the author, is having complete accuracy and precision. Complete accuracy and precision. تام الضبط. So therefore, what's meant by al-dabt and what's meant by tamamuhu? As we previously explained before, al-dabt is of two types. One is of the sadr, and one is of the kitab, memory by heart and memory through your notes by heart. And then we have notes. So the narrator of hadith doesn't necessarily have to have the strongest memory by heart, but if his notes are accurate, if he is a good scribe, if he pays attention, he jots down what the muhaddith is telling him and explaining to him, and he preserves his book. He doesn't allow anyone to play around with it, to erase something, to scratch something out, to switch the papers, to copycat or mimic his handwriting, forge something, then it's accepted as well. Obviously, the sadr, having the ability to memorize something by heart, is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even some of the people of knowledge, they say that whenever the two narrators differ over a report, whatever's in the book is more sound and more authentic than that which is reported by memory. Whereas once a person writes something down accurately, the book doesn't make a mistake, but the mind can err. And that's relative. There's some people whose memories are much sharper than what's in a book, without a doubt. Khairan, inshallah. So therefore, that's al-dabt, is to memorize the khabar at the time of hearing the khabar and having the ability to spit it back, to regurgitate it, to say it, to quote it, to cite it whenever you want to. Memory. Okay? You ask the report, he can say the report whenever he wants to. And if he can't do that, or even if he can, but he wishes to write them down, that's fine as well. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala, when he was, he says, وَأَيُّ شَيْءٍ كُنَّا نَحْنُ لَوْلَا الْكِتَابِ. He says, what would we be if we didn't write things down? Imam Ahmad, when he used to report his ahadith and teach his students, he would read from his book. He would have his book with him, and that was Imam Ahmad. So it's nothing wrong with having notes or having a piece of paper or having your books. Khair, inshallah. So therefore, that's dabt, as we previously explained. But the author, he says, tamam al-dabt. Or he says tam al-dabt, and we said tamam. Tam al-dabti. Complete precision. In other words, he can't be a person who's half and half, so and so, soft shell, as we would say. He has to be hardcore. He has to have the ability to memorize, to retain the information precisely and accurately. Once he does that, the narrator, man or woman, slave or free, young or old, then they have, or this khabar has fulfilled the second condition, and that is tamam al-dabt. It must have what? Tamam al-dabt. The dabt must be what? Precise. Must be strong. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, muttasil as-sanadi. The third condition of the khabar maqbool to the Hafiz ibn Hajar, he says what? Muttasil as-sanad. We say ittisal as-sanad. The chain must be continuous. Yani, you would write غير منقطع بأي وجه من أوجه الانقطاع كان. Any way of inqita', any type of breakage or break in the chain, either any type of way, as we've explained, as we're going to explain again. Mu'allaq, mudallas, mursal, mursal khafi, mu'adal, according to the author, rahimahullah ta'ala. So the second second condition that we mentioned today, and the third condition mentioned by the author, is ittisal as-sanad. And what's meant by ittisal as-sanad is that we have the master and the apprentice, the sheikh and the tilmeed, the muhaddith and the talib. Okay, the rawi and the marwi anhu. The student got the narration from the teacher one way or another, whether he heard it from him directly, whether he corresponded with him, whether he gave him ijazah, the different types of tahammul, which are going to come later on in the book, bi'idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore it can't be any breaking in the chain, any breakage in the chain. So the third condition and the second condition today is what? Continuous chain. Chain must be continuous. Can't have any breaking. In other words, the rawi, the student, heard from the sheikh. He heard from him. He read from him. There is a direct connection between the two. And there isn't a break. There isn't a point of a breaking point. There isn't a wasita. There isn't a medium, a middleman. Or we say an in-between. Because if there is an in-between, who is the in-between? What's his level? The Muslim, kafir, person of sunnah, person of bid'ah, strong memory, poor memory, righteous, wicked, we don't know. Or maybe we do know, we find out and that person is extremely weak. So the chain must be connected. It must be ittisal as-sanad. And we said before, is that you don't necessarily have to say the student heard from the teacher. Perhaps that's on a beginner's elementary level. But later on, as we ascend, we say that the student took from the sheikh in a acceptable manner, in a way of tahammul. And this word here, at-tahammul, is receiving the information to, we're going to have to write it in English. At-tahammul is receiving the hadith. Is receiving the hadith, is taking the hadith, is getting the hadith from the sheikh. And there are many different ways of tahammul. It's not just one. Okay? The basic way, and the most common, popular way, is what we call as-sama', to hear it. And then we have al-qira'atu al-shaykh, to take the sheikh's notes and read it to him. And then there are other types of tahammul, but these are the main two right here at this stage. So what's important is that the rawi doesn't necessarily have to hear from the sheikh, but he got his narrations in an acceptable manner. And that's in brief. The author is going to mention a whole entire separate chapter on at-tahammul and on al-ada'. Khayran, inshallah. The author, Hafiz bin Hajar, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, غَيْرَ مُعَلَّلٍ. Third condition in this lesson, / fourth condition of the ahad hadith, which is authentic, which is accepted, is it cannot be mu'allal or mu'all or ma'lul. All of these words are permissible and valid in the Arabic language to be used. غير mu'allal. Can't have any illah. Any illah. What's meant by the illah? The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, is going to mention that later on when he starts talking about al-khabr al-mardud, the rejected type of khabr. And we also explained that in Bayquni in brief as well. The illah, coming from the word what? Illatun. Can't have no illah in the khabr. So we see that the first three conditions of the khabr ahad maqbool is what? Has to be what? There are shurut that must be present. Conditions that have to be fulfilled. And the last two conditions, according to the author, are what we call shurut intifa'iyah. They're conditions that cannot be there, that cannot be existing. It can't have an illah in the khabar, regardless whether the illah is in the isnad, or regardless of whether the illah is in the matan, or the illah could be in both. The illah could be in both. Al-muhim is that the hadith that has an illah in it is rejected, it isn't accepted, even if the matan is authentic in another report. Everybody understand this? Or even if there's an illah in the isnad in which won't harm the isnad, in which the narrator was confused between two of his scholars and both of them were thiqah. That's still an illah, and that's still a khata, and that's still an incorrect report. But we don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. That's a very deep conversation with regards to illah qadiha and illa ghayr qadiha. Is there such thing as illa ghayr qadiha? Khayran inshallah. So therefore that's the third and the fourth condition. The third today and the fourth in the book is that the hadith cannot be mu'allal. So we understand from the author's speech, any khabar ahad that has an illa in it is not maqbool. It's not sahih. The fourth and fifth, the final condition of the author's speech, he says here, wala shadh. Wala shadh. We say what? Intifa al-shududh. Intifa al-shududh. Can't have any shududh in the khabar. Can't have any what? Shududh. Cannot be shadh. And what's meant by the word shadh, the author, rahimahullah, is going to explain his view on it as well. And we explained before in Al-Baykhuniyah. And we say that there's long difference of opinion among the people of knowledge of hadith with regards to what is a shadh khabar. What's meant by shududh? Some of the people of knowledge, they say that the shadh khabar is a khabar that is reported by someone who is accepted, someone who is acceptable, a thiqah or saduq, someone who's trustworthy, who's reliable, regardless of the level of reliability. And they go against a report that's more reliable, that's stronger, either because there were more people, or because there was one person that was stronger, a better student, a better specialist, a bigger professional, etc. We've explained that before, and we've also given physical examples of this in many videos. Physical examples of the illah and of the shududh. That's one view. Another view is that the shadh khabar is the khabar of a narrator that is sole and isolated. He's the only one that reports it. Khayran inshallah. And there are other views with regards to the definition of shadh. We say what's important is that this term is what? Nadirul wujud. Qalilul isti'mal. Very seldomly used among the ulama of hadith of the past. The ulama of hadith that came later on, the later centuries, they used it often. And they made long, extensive debates and arguments on what's meant by shadh. But when we look at the early ulama of hadith, the kalam of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Yahya ibn Ma'in, Ali ibn al-Madini, even before them, the founding fathers, Shu'bah ibn Hajjaj, Abdurrahman ibn Mahdi, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, and then later on, the third generation, the pupils of Ahmad, Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Muslim, Nasa'i, and those who came after them as well, we don't find this word being used too much, shadh. Here and there. Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he used it. At-Tirmidhi used it in brief. Very, 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 very brief. Okay? Then later on came Al-Hakim, Al-Khalili, and things like this. But the ulama of hadith, the founding fathers, jiddan, very, very seldom. So a person will ask the question, and we don't want to go too controversial, but a person will ask the question, would it make too much sense to spend a great deal of time dealing with a term that was barely used? That's first and foremost. The next point of deep reflection, is there a difference between shadh and mu'all? Is there a difference? Are they two different concepts? Or are they the same? Is shududh discovered through another path of discovering illah? Is shadh not something that's khafi, ghamid, hidden? So is there a difference between the two? In other words, is there a need for having 5 conditions of the khabar maqbool? Or is it best to just make 4 conditions? Connection of the chain, the continuous nature of the isnad, that they be trustworthy, reliable Muslims, strong memory, and they don't have no illah, no shududh, period. Isn't it easier to memorize just 4 conditions instead of 5? What is the purpose and hikmah of making a 5th condition if they're in reality the same? Or if they're not the same, another view, if there's long difference on what is shadh, and the early ulama, those who founded the science and established the science, didn't barely use it. Khair, inshallah, let's move on. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in this very, very long argument, we mentioned only 2 views of what the definition of shadh was. Alright, and we didn't get into the mu'allaq because that's going to come later on as well. These 2 things here, especially the illah and the mu'allaq and the ma'lul, is the pinnacle of hadith science. It's the summit, the highest peak is knowing and being an expert in this concept of the ilm. But that's a long discussion that we can't get into right now. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, huwa sahihu lidatihi. He says once these 5 conditions are fulfilled, then it's called what? As-sahih lidatihi. As-sahih lidatihi. So if he says as-sahih lidatihi, we understand that it could be something which is as-sahih li ghayrihi or li ghayri dhatihi. Li ghayri ish dhatihi. Perhaps he says that this hadith is called sahih by itself, in itself, through itself. In other words, it doesn't need another support. It doesn't need another report. It doesn't need another person or another narration of the khabar to strengthen it, to bolster it, to give it more oomph, more wind. It's sahih itself. So therefore, according to the author, when these conditions are met, 5 standard conditions, the hadith is ruled, or we rule upon the hadith, we judge, we give the ruling that is sahih lidatihi. And as a beneficial note, 9 out of 10 people that came after Al-Hafidh bin Hajar rahimahullah, they walked upon his pavement, the concrete that he laid down, the cement that he put down, the road, the asphalt that he put down. 9 out of 10 people after him walked on it 100%. And very sadly when you find, especially in the modern times, anyone who's explaining the book Nukhbatul-Fikr, audio explanation, written explanation, English or Arabic, 9 out of 10 times they're mentioning the explanations and explanatory points of Hafidh bin Hajar. Very sad when they're going to go outside of his way of thinking, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, whether it's the best or not. It's not the point we're trying to get to. We're trying to prove a point here is how great of a status he had and how he revolutionized the science. And he had different opinions and reservations. And there were people who came before Hafidh bin Hajar that differed with him. Obviously, before him, they didn't know him, but they had views that were contrary to the views that he made. And there were some people that came after him that differed with him as well. But most people, they based their speech, their explanations off of what Hafidh bin Hajar explained in this book and in other books. And in other books as well, not just this book, such as Fath al-Bari, Taqliq al-Ta'liq, such as An-Nukat, such as Nuzhat al-Nadar, the Sharh of this, and many other books. Khairan, inshallah. So let's move on. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, وَيَتَفَاوَتُ رُتُبُهُ بتفاوت هذه الأوصاف. He says, and there are different levels of Sahih لذاته based off of these conditions. In other words, we have a hadith in which is a strong chain, absolute strength. This narrator studied with the Shaykh for a very long time. He heard from him, he wrote down from him, he got ijazah from him. That's going to be stronger than the sanad of a narrator that just met the Shaykh once or twice and heard from him in a few sittings. Okay? The person who is considered to be a hafiz, thiqah, mutqin, one who is a genius, a major prodigy of memorization, is not like the one who's just thiqah. It's not like the one who's just la ba'sa bihi thiqatun saduq. It's not the same. It's different levels of memory, strength of memory. Okay, and the list goes on. So therefore, there are levels of sahih based off of these conditions. He then says, وَمِنْ ثَمَّ قُدِّمَ صَحِيحُ الْبُخَارِي ثُمَّ مُسْلِمْ ثُمَّ شَرْطُهُمَا. He says, and this is the reason behind Sahih al-Bukhari coming first. Sahih al-Bukhari taking precedence. This is what the Hafiz bin Hajar rahimahullah says. He says that Sahih al-Bukhari is given precedence, and it's a more authentic book than Sahih Muslim because of what? Bukhari knew more than Muslim? Bukhari was the teacher of Muslim? He doesn't say that, but he says what? Because of the awsaf al-mutafawita, يعني الرتب, درجات, شروط. Al-Bukhari rahimahullah, according to Hafiz bin Hajar, his conditions are stronger or higher. He was more strict than Al-Hafiz Muslim ibn Hajjaj. So therefore he says that the book of Sahih Bukhari is more authentic. Not saying that Muslim's book isn't authentic, but he says it's more authentic. It's stronger, it's more solid, and it gets precedence. It gets precedence. This is from the angle or the aspect of the sciences of hadith. As far as al-fiqh and the athar and istinbat and different, there's other reasons why Bukhari is a more beneficial book in general. And then there are other things that Imam Muslim has that Bukhari doesn't. Okay, not mentioned here. There are different points that Imam Muslim rahimahullah ta'ala has that Imam al-Bukhari doesn't. Such as the categorization, the organization of the akhbar, the asrar, the secrets, how he organized the hadith, كيف رتبها, his tartib, and the different badai', the different hidden gems in Sahih Muslim, which we don't have time to get into, nor is that on our beginner's level. That's a long discussion, only for those who specialize in that science with open minds, not for those who have closed minds. Khairan inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a brief. He says, ثُمَّ Muslim, the book of Imam Muslim, ثُمَّ شَرْطُهُمَا. Then it is the hadith that is upon the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim. They say what? Al-hadithu alladhi ala shart shaykhain. The shaykhain. Who are the shaykhain? I know I'm writing very sloppy or sloppily. Ash-shaykhan. My handwriting is not good at all. It's never been in English, let alone in Arabic, let alone, trying to cover as much ground as can in a limited amount of time that we have. Ash-shaykhan. The conditions, the shurut of Bukhari and Muslim. Shurut al-Bukhari and the shurut of Muslim. What are the shurut? What are the conditions? Did Imam al-Bukhari write an introduction to his book? No, he didn't. So how do we know the conditions of Imam al-Bukhari? Did Imam Muslim write an introduction to his book? Yes, he did. Did he explicitly talk about his conditions? Not necessarily. He spoke on some conditions. He spoke on some ways how he wrote his book, how he's going to put his book together, the reason why he wrote the book, what he did, what he didn't do, what he avoided. But in general, they haven't specifically, explicitly spoken on their shurut. Because as we've learned, there are general conditions of the khabar that's maqbool, general conditions. And as if the author Hafiz bin Hajar rahimahullah is saying that these two guys, al-Bukhari and Muslim, their conditions are higher up. They're higher up. Okay, even more rigid conditions than the general conditions of everybody. And we understand from the speech, is that he's saying that in general, this is hypothetically, according to Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, that the conditions of Sahih Bukhari, or just because if a hadith is in one of their two books, or if hadith is outside of the books but it fulfills their conditions, it's more authentic than any other hadith. It's more authentic than a hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud. Okay, even though a hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud could be ala shart shaykhin. Okay, now to make this brief as we can, Shaykhan rahimahumullah, let's make an example of a narrator. And once again, this is only hypothetical. This is only hypothetical, theoretical. We have a rawi, right? A rawi. What is the condition for him to be an accepted rawi? For his khabar to be accepted is what? He has to be what? Adil. And there are conditions of adala as we explained. And then he has to be what? Thiqa. Or not even that, because we say what? He has to be what? Dabit. And there are conditions of the dabt, sad-dabt kitaba. So these two conditions for the rawi, al-maqbool, are in any book in which there's going to be authentic hadith. In Tirmidhi, Musnad Ahmad, Malik, etc. He says that this rawi in al-Bukhari has the highest level of adala. And the rawi in Sahih Bukhari has the highest level of dabt. He's not just a memorizer, but he's a hafiz. As if he says that Bukhari's narrators, he only has narrators that are of the finest quality of memory. And those who are well known, people of sunnah, respected, well known narrators, the sahaba that were well known, etc. Hypothetically, this is an example of something that will be shart shaykhin. Okay? Or another concept is the next condition of the khabar maqbool is what? Ittisal as-sanad. Al-Bukhari, mathalan, he may say, or he may have the concept of what? Ishtiratul luqi. Is that the narrator must have met his teacher. Not probable, not possible, not perhaps he met him, they lived in the same time, hypothetically, but he said what? He met him what? For sure. And some people may say that Imam Muslim, his madhab, some people they may say Imam Muslim's madhab is what? Imkaniyatu al-liqa or al-mu'asara. Al-mu'asara. Not saying this is absolutely correct, that Muslim has this view. This was some people attribute to Imam Muslim. They say that Imam Muslim has the view is that if it's possible, if it's yumkin for the two narrators, the student and the teacher to have met, and for him to have heard from him, then he accepts it. So they say based off of this is why Bukhari's book is stronger. Because Bukhari makes sure, and he says, no, I'm not going to have any chances. It must have been historically documented that they met. Everybody understand this? So this is just a general concept of shart shaykhin. And there are other scholars of hadith who may have the view that is not a condition. Khayran inshallah. And there are many other things. There are many other things and reasons that make a hadith upon shart shaykhin according to the author. Now what's meant by shart shaykhin? Is it hadith that has the same narrators in it, in the chain of narration as Bukhari Muslim? Is that enough? We say no. Rather, not only must they be the same narrators, but it must be in the same mannerism. In other words, did Imam al-Bukhari use narrator A with narrator B? Not necessarily. Both narrator A and narrator B are inside Bukhari, but are they together? In other words, there may be a hidden glitch and an illah when narrator A narrates from narrator B. And that's a long discussion. So that's in brief. Let's move on. The author rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, فَإِنْ خَفْتَ الضَّبْطُ فَالْحَسَنُ لِذَاتِهِ وَبِكَثْرَةِ طُرُقِهِ يُصَحَّحُ فإن جمع فللتردد في الناقل حيث التفرد وإلا فباعتبار اسنادين وزيادة راويهما مقبولة ما لم تقع منافية لمن هو أوثق فإن خولف بأرجح فالراجح المحفوظ ومقابله الشاذ. وإن وقعت مع الضعف فالراجح المعروف ومقابله المنكر. He then says, فإن خف الضبط, if there is a lack of dabt, relative lack of dabt. The dabt, as we said before, what? Tam ad-dabt. If there is khifat dabt, or the rawi is what? Khafif ad-dabt, then Hafiz ibn Hajar says it's called what? Al-Hasanu li-dhatihi. Just like Sahih li-dhatihi. And perhaps there is also a Hasan li-ghayrihi, which will come later on, inshallah. So he says that the Hasan hadith is a hadith that has the same conditions, the same prerequisites as the Sahih hadith, except for one thing. And that one thing is only khifat al-dabt, is that the precision of the narrator isn't as sharp. It isn't what? It isn't as sharp. Everybody understand this? It isn't what? It isn't as sharp. So therefore we have sharpness and we have sharper. Sharp and we have sharper. Everybody understand this? The Hasan hadith, let's make a metaphorical example. It must be sharp. It must be what? It must be sharp. But the Sahih hadith is what? Sharper. So I have a knife, and the knife is sharp. I can cut with it. But then I have a special chef's knife. Oh, I have some Japanese cutlery in my kitchen. This is super sharp. You get cut by the knife just by looking at it, let alone putting your finger on it. That's sharper, sharpest. That doesn't mean that the American cutting knife isn't sharp. It doesn't mean that. Everybody understand this? So therefore, the Japanese knife and the American knife, they're both knives. There's a handle, there's a forged blade, stainless steel, there's a hand guard, etc. They're both similar. They both share the same qualities of a knife, of a cutting knife, of a steak knife. Everybody understand this? But the Japanese knife is sharper. It's extremely sharp. When you're cutting with it, it's effortless. Everybody understand this? So this is the Hasan hadith and the Sahih hadith according to the Hafiz bin Hajar. The Hasan hadith cannot have an inqita'. It cannot be a breakage in the chain. It cannot be mu'all. It cannot be shadh. It cannot be a narrator who's da'if. It's just a narrator who's Muslim, who's trustworthy, but his dabt, his sharpness is a grade under. That's it. We have grade A and then we have under grade A. Everybody clear on this? Just like gasoline. Any other example you want to make? You have premium and then you have besides premium. Khayr inshallah. But it doesn't mean that it's bad gasoline. Khayr inshallah. Moving on. The author then says, rahimahullah, وَبِكَثْرَةِ تُرُقِهِ يُصَحَّحْ. And when there's abundant turuq, the Hasan lidatihi now becomes sahih. So let's say we have a hadith which is called what? Al-Hasanu lidatihi. And instead of one isnad, this is one tariq, isnad, two isnads, three isnads, four isnads, five isnads, six isnads. Instead of it becoming staying Hasan lidatihi, it now becomes, according to the author, as-sahihu li ghayrihi. As-sahih li ghayrihi. And the sahih li ghayrihi is basically a Hasan lidatihi hadith with abundant turuq. In other words, more than one what? Isnad. In other words, what? More than one isnad. Everybody clear on this? More than one isnad. So if there are 3 or 4 different Hasan isnads, then it now becomes what? Sahih li ghayrihi. And what's meant by li ghayrihi is it is not sahih li dhatihi. It's the opposite of sahih li dhatihi. It's not sahih by itself, in itself. But it's only sahih because of other support narrations that make it strong. That make it what? Strong. It's reinforced. It's reinforced. Khayran inshallah. The author rahimahullah ta'ala then says, فَإِن جُمِعَ فَلِلتَّرَدُّدِ فِي النَّاقِلِ. He says, and if we mention, or if both terms or words are mentioned, what's meant by both terms and words? جُمِعَ. Yani, if the muhaddith says هذا حديث حسن صحيح, Hasanun Sahih, such as Imam al-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, from the most famous of those who mention two terms in one. What's meant by that? How can a hadith be Hasan and Sahih? According to the author, in which he said that the Hasan is one thing and the Sahih is one thing. That's a very long problem, a huge problem, because most of the ulama who use this term, such as Imam al-Tirmidhi, lived hundreds of years before Hafiz ibn Hajar, and they had different meanings and different usages of the term. We don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole. What's important is that the author says if you find a statement Hasanun Sahih, hadith is Hasanun Sahih, what's meant by Hasan Sahih? He says there are two interpretations, and the reason why he makes these two interpretations is because he's as if he's saying how can it be Hasan and Sahih at the same time? Whereas Sahih means one thing and Hasan means one thing. But we say, before we even go that far, this is according to the author, and that's not necessarily according to Al-Hafiz, the Tirmidhi and others. They have different meaning and intention by the word Hasan. Khairan inshallah. He says, فَلِلْتَرَدُّدِ فِي النَّاقِلِ. There's a naqil, and what's meant by the naqil is the rawi. It's taraddud. It's what? Taraddud. In other words, you say what? Ikhtilaf or khilaf. Is there a difference between ikhtilaf and khilaf? Long story. Al-Muhim, that's what's meant by taraddud. And as a piece of advice, whenever you have the ability to use a synonym in Arabic, it's better for your vocabulary. It's better for your vocabulary to define the word in Arabic with another synonym, another word. Moving on. So the naqil is taraddud, yani is ikhtilaf. In other words, one imam says that the rawi is what? Fiqh. And the other imam says that the rawi is what? Saduq. This is the statement of Imam Ahmad. He said it's thiqah. And this is the statement of Imam Ibn al-Madini. He said it is saduq. There's a difference between the two. Sometimes these are interchangeable terms. But on this hypothetical level of elementary studies in hadith, they're different. Thiqah, saduq. If he's thiqah, then the hadith is going to be what? Sahih. If he's saduq, then the hadith is going to be what? Hasan. Everybody understand this? So Hafiz ibn Hajar says this is the first reason why there's in Jumu'ah, when the Hasan and Sahih are mentioned together. And this clearly proves the ignorance of those who say that there's no difference of opinion in al-jarh wa ta'dil. These people are ignorant, as we said before. And when we say ignorant, we're not just talking about some, small fry da'i who barely knows Arabic, who went overseas and came back and dropped out. La 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 la. If it's a scholar or a sheikh, whoever it is, that makes that statement that there is no difference of opinion in the science of al-jarh wa ta'dil, then they, in that statement, are ignorant. They, in that statement, that specific statement, they are ignorant. Not no, that's ignorance, jahl, sirf. You've never read any book on jarh wa ta'dil to say that there's no difference of opinion. And the reason why they say that is to force a person into the corner of accepting their criticism of a person. And that's another scientific error and mistake, saying that it's the same as this and that. It's mistake upon mistake upon mistake. So when you read these books and you study these books, you're going to sit down and you're going to scratch your head and say, how the heck did Fulan say this? How did Sheikh Fulan say that? And look here. He says, فَلِلْ تَرَدُّدْ. There's a difference of opinion in the narrator. And this is Hafiz ibn Hajar. So therefore, hypothetically speaking, there's a da'i in the UK. One scholar from overseas said he's upon khair, take and benefit from him. And another scholar from overseas says stay away from him, he's a deviant, he's this and he's that. So therefore, the general mass of the people, they say, well, one scholar who we know and trust, he says we can take from him, so let's take from him. It's obvious difference of opinion. This sheikh knows him better. What he said is detailed. What he said is general and vague. He knew him for 20 years, he doesn't know him. And then the other ignorant person is, la, there's no difference of opinion in jarh wa ta'dil. When this imam speaks, that's it, khalas. It's consensus, it's ijma'. These people are juhal. They haven't studied and read this science. And if they have studied it and have read it, and they do know this information, then it proves that they're evil. They're evil, and they wish to mislead people Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billah. And we don't want to go too far swinging that sword. We don't want to go too far swinging that sword. Moving on. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, wa illa, if that isn't the case, if there's no difference of opinion among the narrator, he says, فَبِعْتِبَارِ إِسْنَادَيْنِ. He says, then the hadith has what? More than one tariq. Hasan, Sahih. In other words, one isnad is Hasan. And one isnad, once again, is what? Sahih. So the hadith has two isnads. So the scholar of hadith will say, هذا حديث حسن صحيح. And what's the big difference between that as well? What's the benefit? If one isnad is Sahih and one is Hasan, what's the deal? Khairan, inshallah. So this is according to Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar. We'll stop here in this session. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu sallam wa barak ala abdi rasulin jazakum Allah khairan.